Hey, welcome to the series of everything you need to know about Python in simplest possible way. In the series of pattern printing, so far we have seen so many patterns. In this video, we will be seeing this particular pattern and how we can solve this particular pattern using for loop, string concatenation, and string multiplication. So, if you don't know about string concatenation and string multiplication, in the video of pattern printing 1, where I have explained clearly about string concatenation and string multiplication, you can watch that video in there. So here what we will be doing is that to print this particular pattern, initially I will be taking a variable as rows. So based on this particular pattern, we can say that we have 5 rows. So for that reason, I am taking the rows as 5. Later, based on the user input, we will print this particular pattern. So for the time being, I will be taking the rows as 5. So if you carefully observe this pattern, we have two different kinds of spaces. One is outer spaces which are of outside of this particular pattern which are of these, and also another spaces which are in between of these particular stars which are of these spaces. So to keep track of these outer spaces, I will be mentioning outer spaces variable. So in this outer spaces variable, to keep track of this variable, keep track of these spaces, what I will be mentioning as, I will mention this outer spaces as 0, because in the first row I don't have any outer spaces. For that reason, I will be mentioning the outer spaces as 0. So to keep track of these inner spaces, what I will be doing is that I will define a variable inner spaces. If you carefully observe this pattern, to mention how many number of inner spaces, we need to have understanding of this particular pattern. Here, if you carefully observe this pattern, in the first row we have 9 stars here. So in the second row also we have 9 positions but not 9 stars. But if you carefully observe here in the beginning, we have one star and one space. At the end, we have one star and one space. So first we will go one after the other. So to define how many number of positions, we will be defining the positions as 2 into rows minus 1. Rows is the number of rows that we are having, which is 5. 2 into 5, which results 10, minus 1, which results 9. So for that reason, I have mentioned this particular formula here. So like that, all these rows are being generated. So not only this input, this works for any input. If you give 6, it will work for 6 rows also. So now what I wanted to define for inner space is that if you carefully observe the second row, we have the positions for one space and one star, and also one space and one star. I wanted to, if I remove this one space and one star two times, I can able to get this particular inner spaces, right? So I hope that makes sense. Now I will be removing minus 2 for this one star and one space, and another minus 2 for this one star and one space. So now I will combine both of these and make it as minus 4. So I hope you can able to understand why I have mentioned this formula to get this particular inner spaces. Now what we will be doing is that to generate this particular pattern, I will use a for loop. For I in range, I will generate a range of values from how many number of rows that we are having till 1. So at last we have getting 1 star. Because of that reason, I will go till 1 star. So for that, in the range function, what I will be mentioning is that I want rows, right? So for that reason, I am mentioning rows. I want to go up to 1. So because of that reason, I am mentioning 0. So by mentioning 0, it will generate range of values rows to 1. So on each iteration, I want to reduce these values to minus 1. So in the for loop, what I will be doing is that I will check a condition. I don't want this particular row and this particular row to be having these spaces. So if you carefully observe here, we are having these inner spaces in between of these rows only. So not having this first row and last row. So I am mentioning a condition to check the iteration of I is first row or not, first row and last row or not. So for that reason, I am mentioning I equal to 1. It mentions that I is equal to this single star. So for the last row, so or I equal to rows. how many number of rows that we are having, which defines like this particular first row. So if this is true, if we are getting first row or last row, at that time I will be printing first we have these outer spaces, right? So though in the first row we don't have outer spaces, in the last row we have outer spaces. For that reason, I will mention this outer spaces multiplied with outer spaces. That is what the variable name that we are having, right? So I will concatenate these spaces with the stars that we are having. So I will mention a star here, and I will multiply this star with this particular I, so that it will dynamically changes the values. So if you carefully observe, we are not having 5 stars here. We are having 9 stars. So how we are getting 9 stars is that we are multiplying this particular position of I with 2 number of times minus 1. So by putting this, we are getting this particular 9 stars here. 9 stars here. That is what we have discussed previously also, by putting 2 into how many number of rows that we are having minus 1. By that we are getting 9 stars. 2 into 5, which is 10. 10 minus 1, which is 5. Like that we are getting. So I will print this particular statement. After printing this particular statement, I want to increment this particular outer spaces, because on each iteration these outer spaces are incremented, right? So for that reason I will increment these outer spaces. Outer spaces less equal to 1. So on each iteration, I will increment these outer spaces. So if this condition is not true, if we are not having first row or last row, at that time what we will be doing is that we will be entering this particular else block and printing. First, we have these outer spaces, right? So outer space, all these having outer spaces. For that reason, I will take a space and I will multiply this space with outer spaces. So after that, what I will be doing is that after completion of this outer spaces, we have single star, right? In each row, we have single star. For that reason, I will mention a single star. After completion of this single star, we are concatenating these inner spaces. On each row, in middle of this first and last row, we have inner spaces, right? So for that reason, I will mention space here, and I will multiply this space with inner stars, inner spaces. So I am mentioning inner spaces. So after this, what I will be doing is that at last we have single star, right? So to mention this single star, I will concatenate these spaces with a single star. So by doing this, we can actually do this particular generate these particular spaces and stars in middle of first and last rows. So after completion of this, what I will be doing is that I will increment this particular outer spaces. For that, OUTR outer spaces and place equal to 1. By mentioning outer spaces place equal to 1, the outer spaces will be incremented on each iteration. So after that, we also need to keep track of these inner spaces, right? For that reason, I will be mentioning inner spaces. So what we need to do is that we need to decrement these inner spaces. So to keep track, we check this pattern. So in the pattern, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In the second row, we have 5 spaces, and in the third row, we have 1, 2, 3. In third row, we have 3 spaces, and in the last row, and which is previous of last row, which is a we have 1 spaces. So by that you can observe on each iteration we are reducing the spaces of inner spaces with 2. So if by for that reason I have mentioned minus equal to true. If I execute this, I can able to get the same result what we have expected. So you can see the result as the same pattern that what we have got in here by executing this particular program. I will execute one more time. I can able to get the same pattern. So by this we can able to get this particular pattern. I hope you have understood this particular logic. If not, let me explain one more time. So to know how many number of times, how many number of rows we have, I am taking the variable as rows assigned with statically 5. So in by observing this pattern, we have understood that we have outer spaces and inner spaces. Outer space defined with 0, because in the first row we don't have any spaces, and inner spaces we have found a logic how we are getting this particular inner spaces, which is of 2 into how many number of rows minus 1, and these 4 which are of positions of a single space and star and another single space and star. So by using this for loop, we are generating a range of values from 5 till 1. So after that, we are checking a condition which is this particular iteration of I value is equal to first row or last row. If that is first row or last row, we were entering and printing this particular pattern, which is of first we are printing the spaces with outer spaces, and we are concatenating these outer spaces with a single star and multiplying with this particular pattern to get this particular rows, which is 2i minus 1. After completion of this, we are updating these outer spaces with 1. We are incrementing the outer spaces with 1. So if this is not true, if this is condition is not true, at that time we will enter this else block, print first the outer spaces and concatenating this single star, because we have outer spaces and single stars, outer spaces and single star, like that we are getting the pattern. After that we are entering to this inner spaces and printing these inner spaces, and at last we are printing a single space here, and all the rows we are having single space. So after completion of this print statement, we are updating these outer spaces with incrementing of 1 and inner spaces with decrementing of 2 on each iteration. So like that we can able to get this pattern. Now I hope you can able to understand this logic better. So now I will take this 5 and take input dynamically from the user. For that I am taking int because I want integer value as input. I am mentioning input to read the input from the user. So I am asking user to enter any number. So now I will execute this particular program. If I execute this, I am asking to enter any number. I will mention 5 here. If I mention 5, I am getting this kind of pattern what we have seen previously. So now I will give another number. Let's say I am giving number 9. So if I execute this, I can able to get the similar pattern. So if I execute this and give maybe number 16, so now I can able to get the same pattern. So by using this logic, we can generate this pattern with any input given by the user. So in the next video, we will discuss this particular pattern and how we can solve this particular pattern using for loop, string concatenation, and also using string multiplication. And if you can solve this particular problem, comment your solution in the comment section. Even then, we will discuss this solution for this pattern in our next video. To stay updated, subscribe to this channel and turn on the notifications to all, so that whenever I upload any video, you will get the notification. And if you found this video interesting, if you understood this particular pattern printing problem, hit the like button and see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.